Welcome to the Deep Dive, your express ticket to truly understanding complex topics. Today, we're getting into something fundamental, how your body actually moves.
Yeah, we're diving into the control of body movement from Vander's human physiology, our mission, to really break down this, super complex system.
Make it clear how you go from thinking about moving to actually doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
From just reaching out your hand to, say, playing a sport. It seems simple, but it's incredibly sophisticated.
Right. Think about, I don't know, kicking a soccer ball. The coordination involved is just amazing. Or even just picking up this microphone.
And we're going to unpack the systems behind those actions.
So where does it all start? What are the basics?
Okay, so the fundamental building blocks are your motor units. Think of it like this. One motor neuron,
That's the nerve cell.
right? The nerve cell coming from your brain or spinal cord and all the skeletal muscle fibers it controls. That's one unit.
Gotcha. One commander, many soldiers.
Sort of, yeah. And these motor neurons, they're often called the final common pathway because any command to your skeletal muscles, no matter where it starts in the brain, has to go through these guys.
Okay, the bottleneck, in a
The
way.
essential channel,
Yeah.
yeah. And then all the motor neurons supplying a single muscle,
Hmm.
they hang out together in what's called a motor neuron pool, usually grouped in the spinal cord or brainstem.
So it's organized right from the start.
Very organized.
Yeah.
And the key to smooth, precise movement is this constant balancing act. You've got signals telling the motor neuron go, excitatory signals.
And others saying hold back.
Exactly, inhibitory signals. It's this push and pull. And most movements aren't just one muscle, right? It's a whole sequence, multiple muscles timed perfectly.
It really highlights some core physiology principles, doesn't it? Like information flow.
Absolutely. Constant communication between cells and systems.
Yeah.
And that control by opposing forces, excitatory versus inhibitory, you see that everywhere in physiology.
Plus, just standing upright shows how we're governed by physics, like gravity.
Totally. So today we'll walk through the motor control hierarchy, look at local control, the brain centers involved, the pathways down,
Muscle tone, posture, balance.
and even walking. So let's start at the top with that motor control hierarchy.
Okay, like a company org chart for movement.
Kind of, yeah. 3 conceptual levels. The highest level is about intentions, where you form the general plan. I want to pick up that sweatshirt or, sign my name.
The big idea.
The big idea. And this involves brain areas linked to memory, emotions, motivation, and the sensorimotor cortex. It integrates tons of info to shape that initial command.
Then that plan goes down a level.
Down to the middle level. This is where the general plan gets translated into specific motor programs, detailed instructions, basically.
So how to pick up the sweatshirt, like which muscles in what order.
Exactly. How to shift your weight, extend your arm, adjust your posture. It breaks it down into sub-programs for each joint involved. And this level needs sensory feedback.
So it's not just sending orders blind.
No way. It gets info from your muscles, tendons, joints, skin, eyes, your inner ear, all telling it about your body's current position and the environment. This helps build what's called an internal model. Without good sensory input, movements get clumsy, uncoordinated.
Okay, so highest level has the idea, middle level makes the detailed blueprint using feedback.
And then sends it to the local level. This is ground control. It gets the program and figures out exactly which motor neurons need to fire and precisely when.
The final executioners.
Right. But they're smart executioners. They constantly adjust based on what's happening. If that sweatshirt is unexpectedly wet and heavy or you bump into something,
The local level adapts on the fly.
instantly. And this relies heavily on proprioception.
That's the sense of where your body parts are.
Yeah, your internal awareness of body position. This constant stream of feedback allows for tiny corrections, often through reflexes you're not even aware of.
Which explains why practice helps so much. You refine those initial motor programs.
Precisely. Think about learning a new skill, like playing an instrument. At first, it's very conscious, very voluntary. Every finger placement is thought out.
Right, super clunky.
But with practice, it becomes smoother, more automatic. It moves along that spectrum from voluntary towards involuntary, though even reflexes can sometimes be consciously overridden, which is interesting.
Okay, so let's zoom in on that local level. How does it manage all this fine-tuning? That's the local control of motor neurons, right?
Exactly. These are the relay points, the immediate adjusters. And most signals coming down don't go straight to the motor neurons. They go through interneurons first,
The middleman.
kind of the crucial integrators. About 90% of spinal cord neurons are interneurons. They get input from above, from sensory receptors, from other interneurons, and they decide the final output to the motor neurons.
So they're doing a lot of the processing locally.
A huge amount. Some are involved in coordinating complex patterns, like pattern generators for walking or running. These circuits create that rhythmic activity.
Like an internal metronome for your legs.
That's a good way to think about it. And interneurons can also act like switches. Remember holding that hot plate? The reflex says drop it.
But the interneuron gets an override signal from your brain saying, nope, hold on.
Exactly. It inhibits the reflex arc, a perfect example of descending control modifying local activity.
And a lot of this local control depends on sensory feedback, you said. Local afferent input.
Absolutely vital. Information pouring in from receptors in muscles, tendons, joints, skin.
Okay, tell us about the muscle spindles. They sound important.
Oh, they are. They're your length monitors. Tiny receptors inside the muscle itself, wrapped around special muscle fibers called intrafusal fibers.
Different from the main muscle fibers that create force.
Right. The main ones are extrafusal fibers. The spindles sit in parallel, monitoring how much the muscle is stretched and how fast it's stretching.
How do they keep measuring when the muscle contracts and gets shorter? Wouldn't they go slack?
Great question. That's where alpha-gamma coactivation comes in. Your alpha motor neurons activate the main extrafusal fibers to make the muscle contract. But at the same time, gamma motor neurons activate the ends of those special interfusal fibers within the spindle.
Ah, so they shorten too, keeping the middle part taut.
Precisely. It keeps the spindle sensitive and sending accurate length information back to the CNS even as the main muscle changes length. It's a really elegant system.
And this is involved in reflexes like the knee jerk.
The classic example.
Yeah.
That's the stretch reflex. Tapping the patellar tendon stretches your thigh muscle. The muscle spindles fire
Sending a signal back.
directly back to the alpha motor neurons of that same thigh muscle, causing it to contract. That's the kick. And it's monosynaptic, just one synapse between the sensory neuron and the motor neuron. Super fast.
The only one like that, apparently?
As far as we know, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just that. Other branches of that same sensory neuron talk to interneurons.
Ah, the polysynaptic part.
Right. They inhibit the motor neurons going to the opposing muscle, the hamstring in this case.
Mhm.
That's reciprocal innervation. Allows the kick to happen smoothly without the hamstring fighting it.
Makes sense. So spindles monitor length. What monitors tension or force?
That's the job of the Golgi tendon O-rings. These are located in the tendons where the muscle attaches to the bone.
So they sense the pull on the tendon.
Exactly. They're endings of sensory nerves wrapped around collagen fibers in the tendon. They fire most strongly during active muscle contraction, telling your brain how much force the muscle is generating.
Useful for fine control and preventing damage, maybe?
Both, yeah. The info goes up for conscious awareness, but also feeds into local circuits to help coordinate movement and adjust muscle stiffness, especially during things like walking.
And what about protective reflexes, like stepping on something sharp?
Right, the withdrawal reflex. Pain receptors fire, activating signals in the spinal cord.
Which tells the leg muscles.
Tells the flexor muscles on that same side, the ipsilateral side, to contract, pulling your leg away. And it inhibits the extensors on that side
That you don't fall over.
because of the crossed extensor reflex. The same pain signal crosses the spinal cord and does the opposite on the other contralateral leg.
So it activates the extensors and inhibits the flexors on the good leg.
Exactly. That leg stiffens to support your weight as you lift the injured one. It's a beautifully coordinated response.
Incredible. Okay, let's move up the chain now to the brain motor centers and the descending pathways, the big bosses.
This is where the high-level planning and complex coordination really happen. The cerebral cortex is key, especially the sensorimotor cortex.
Which parts are those exactly?
It's a network, really.
Yeah.
Includes the primary motor cortex, the premotor area, supplementary motor cortex, and also parts of the somatosensory cortex and parietal cortex, which integrate sensory input, like visual guidance for reaching.
And there's that map in the motor cortex, right? The homunculus.
Yeah, the somatotopic map, where different body parts are represented. But it's not perfectly rigid. There's overlap and plasticity. Lots of neurons work together for any single movement.
So one neuron might help with multiple different actions.
Definitely. It allows for flexibility and learning. Think about combing your hair. You can do it with either hand, start from different angles.
Yeah.
The network adapts.
Okay, cortex is key. What about structures underneath it? Subcortical and brainstem nuclei.
Crucial partners. They interact constantly with the cortex, mostly through loops. They're involved in planning, learning skilled movements, setting up sequences.
And the basal nuclei are a major part of this.
Huge part. These paired structures deep in the brain form loops. Cortex to basal nuclei to thalamus, back to cortex. Some loops help start or facilitate movement, others help suppress unwanted movement. It's a balance.
And when that balance is off, Parkinson's disease.
That's a prime example. In Parkinson's, there's a loss of dopamine input to the basal nuclei, specifically from a brainstem area called the substantia nigra.
And dopamine is important for.
It normally helps modulate the activity in these loops. Without enough dopamine, the balance shifts. The circuits that suppress movement become overactive relative to the ones that facilitate it.
Leading to the symptoms, like difficulty starting movement.
Exactly. Akinesia, reduced movement. Bradykinesia, slow movement. Plus rigidity and that characteristic tremor at rest.
Treatments aim to restore dopamine.
Mostly, yeah. Drugs like L-Dopa, which the brain converts to dopamine, or drugs that mimic dopamine. Deep brain stimulation is another option, using electrodes to kind of retune the circuits in the basal nuclei.
Fascinating and tragic. What about the cerebellum, another major player?
Oh, absolutely. Tucked away at the back, under the cortex. It receives input from pretty much everywhere: cortex, sensory systems, vestibular system.
And it influences movement indirectly.
Right, through the brainstem and the thalamus back up to the cortex. It doesn't initiate movement, but it's essential for smooth, coordinated, accurately timed movement.
So it's like the quality control supervisor.
That's a good analogy. It provides timing signals, crucial for coordinating muscle contractions and relaxations. It helps with multi-joint movements. It's vital for motor learning, storing movement memories.
And correcting errors?
Yes.
Yeah.
It compares the intended movement plan from the cortex with the actual sensory feedback coming back from the body.
Yeah.
If there's a mismatch, it sends out error signals to correct the movement as it's happening.
So damage to the cerebellum, cerebellar disease leads to?
Not paralysis, but problems with coordination. People can't make smooth movements. They might have an intention tremor, a tremor that gets worse as they approach a target. Very different from the Parkinson's rest tremor.
And issues with balance and walking?
Definitely. Unstable posture, an awkward gait, difficulty combining movements at different joints, learning new motor skills becomes very hard.
Okay, so cortex plans, basal nuclei select and sequence, cerebellum coordinates and corrects. How do the final commands get down to the spinal cord? Descending pathways.
Two main categories. First, the corticospinal pathways, also called the pyramidal tracts.
Pyramidal because they form pyramid shapes in the brainstem.
Exactly. They start in the sensorimotor cortex, and most fibers decussate or cross over in the medulla. So your left brain controls your right side, mostly.
And what are they primarily for?
Fine. Skilled movements, especially the hands and fingers, the distal extremities. Think typing, playing piano, intricate tool use. Damage here makes those actions slow, weak, clumsy.
Okay, that's one pathway. The other?
The brainstem pathways, sometimes called the extrapyramidal system. These start from various nuclei in the brainstem and descend. Importantly, most don't cross over.
So they control muscles on the same side of the body?
Largely, yes.
Yeah.
And they're more involved in coordinating large muscle groups, especially in the trunk and the proximal parts of the limbs, shoulders, hips.
Essential for posture and locomotion.
Absolutely. Things like the vestibulospinal pathway for balance, reticulospinal pathways for posture and muscle tone. They help keep you upright and guide body movements.
But these two systems work together, right? It's not one or the other.
Constantly interacting and coordinated. Every movement involves input from both, tailored to the specific demands of the action.
Right. Let's talk about muscle tone. It sounds simple, but it's clinically important.
It is. Muscle tone is just that slight resistance you feel when you passively move someone's relaxed limb. It's due to the muscle's natural elasticity and a baseline level of alpha motor neuron activity.
So it's not zero activity, even when relaxed.
Not quite zero, especially when you're awake and alert. Tone tends to increase with alertness.
An abnormal tone signals problems, hypertonia.
That's abnormally high tone, increased resistance to passive stretch. Often seen in upper motor neuron disorders, problems with those descending pathways that normally provide some inhibition.
Like spasticity.
Spasticity is one type, where resistance increases initially, then might give way slightly, the clasp knife thing. Rigidity is another, a more constant stiffness, like in tetanus or some forms of Parkinson's.
And the opposite, hypotonia.
Abnormally low tone. Muscles feel floppy, flaccid, often comes with weakness, muscle wasting, atrophy, and decreased reflexes. This usually points to lower motor neuron disorders.
Problems with the alpha motor neurons themselves.
Or the neuromuscular junction, or the muscle fiber itself. A tragic example is ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Progressive degeneration of alpha motor neurons causes severe hypotonia and weakness.
And eventually affects breathing.
Yes. Involvement of respiratory muscles is typically the cause of death. There's sadly no cure for ALS currently.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. How do we manage to stay upright? Maintenance of upright posture and balance. It seems effortless, but it's complex.
Incredibly complex. We're tall bipeds with a high center of gravity balanced on a tiny base our feet. Stability requires keeping that center of gravity over the base of support.
And it's all about postural reflexes.
Largely, yes. Constant tiny adjustments made by muscles, controlled by brainstem and spinal cord circuits. Reflexes like the stretch reflex and crossed extensor are working all the time.
What information do these reflexes use?
Sensory input from three key sources: your eyes, your vestibular apparatus, inner ear balance system, and proprioceptors,
Yeah.
muscle spindles, Golgi tendon organs, joint receptors, skin receptors,
All feeding into brainstem and spinal cord centers.
which then command the alpha motor neurons to make the necessary muscle adjustments. Your brain also builds an internal model of your body's orientation to help plan and maintain stability.
So losing one sense, like vision, doesn't necessarily mean you fall over.
Often not, because the other systems, especially vestibular and proprioceptive, can compensate. But losing proprioception itself is devastating. People might need to constantly look at their feet to stay balanced.
Wow. Okay, last big topic. Walking. Another seemingly automatic marvel.
It really is. It starts with intentionally creating instability, leaning forward, then catching yourself with a forward step.
And then it becomes rhythmic.
Yes. The alternating pattern of lug movements is largely driven by those central pattern-generating networks in the spinal cord we mentioned earlier, interneuron circuits coordinating all the muscles involved.
Arms, legs, trunk, everything working together.
Right. And these pattern generators are adaptable. They respond to sensory feedback and commands from higher brain centers.
So the spinal cord can generate the basic rhythm, but the brain steers and adjusts.
Exactly. Experiments show the spinal cord can produce rhythmic stepping movements even when disconnected from the brain. But normally, your cortex, cerebellum, and brainstem are heavily involved.
For balance, avoiding obstacles, changing speed or direction.
All those voluntary adjustments and adaptations to the environment. It's a beautiful integration of local automaticity and higher-level control.
To illustrate how crucial this balance of control is, let's touch on that clinical case, tetanus.
Right. The 55-year-old woman with the stiff jaw, lockjaw, and back muscles after a puncture wound.
Caused by a bacterial toxin.
Yes, Clostridium tetani bacteria, often in soil, produce tetanospasmin. This toxin gets into the CNS and specifically blocks inhibitory neurotransmitters from being released by interneurons.
So it cuts the brakes on the motor neurons.
Precisely. Without inhibition, the motor neurons become hyperexcitable, firing constantly in response to any excitatory input. This leads to the severe muscle stiffness and spasms.
Affecting the jaw first because of shorter neurons.
Often, yes. Then it can spread. If it affects respiratory muscles, it could be fatal due to asphyxia.
Treatment involves antibodies and support.
Yes, tetanus immune globulin, TIG, to neutralize the toxin, plus antibiotics, wound care, sometimes muscle relaxants or neuromuscular blockers, and respiratory support. Recovery involves the nerve terminals regrowing, which takes time.
A stark reminder of how vital that inhibitory control is.
Absolutely.
Yep.
It highlights the delicate balance throughout the motor system.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, we've journeyed from the highest intention in the brain all the way down to the local reflexes and muscle fibers.
We really have. We saw the hierarchy. High-level planning, middle-level programming using sensory feedback, and local-level execution and adaptation.
We looked at the crucial roles of muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs providing that feedback.
And the reflexes they mediate, like the stretch reflex and reciprocal inhibition.
Then explored the brain centers, the cortex for planning, basal nuclei for selecting and sequencing, and Parkinson's when that goes wrong.
And the cerebellum, the master coordinator and error corrector, with cerebellar disease causing those characteristic coordination problems.
We traced the descending corticospinal and brainstem pathways carrying the commands.
Understood muscle tone, both normal and abnormal, like hypertonia and hypotonia in conditions like ALS.
And finally, appreciated the complex systems maintaining our posture, balance, and enabling the seemingly simple act of walking.
It's an incredibly intricate and elegant system, this control of movement.
So the next time you just, reach for something or take a step, maybe spare a thought for the amazing biological machinery making it happen without you even thinking about it.
From the Deep Dive team, thanks so much for joining us on this exploration. Keep learning, keep questioning, and we'll catch you on the next one.